Where do you start with a scrappy quilt when you have all kinds of scraps? I wanted to add my Christmas scraps from last year to this year's quilt, but I have so many, I need to work through this and figure out what's happening. So first I have a bag of my rope wrapping. Okay, these are the skinny pieces that I wrap rope and make awesome things. We're setting that aside for now. This is larger pieces of fabric, and that's not what I'm looking for right now, but we will get there. And what I want are these pieces. You can see here, these are strips here. These are all 2.5-inch trimmed pieces, and I can sew those together, but look at these. These are all left over from last year. I hardly made a dent in my little strips, but look at what I made. I wanted to give you a quick preview so you can see what we're making today. Look at the mug rugs. What a perfect way to use up just these little tiny 1-inch pieces. And this is sort of a quilt as you go. It's super easy, no binding. It's done like a pillow where you turn it inside out and then do the edges. This one is actually bound, and I'm going to show you how to do that. I just can't wait until we get this finished. You're going to love it. When I was done with my Christmas quilting last year, I brought him back to our other house that's being fixed because I thought surely we'd be back in there by now, but no, we're not. And maybe another month, I don't know. But anyways, I've got to use up this fabric before I start using up all the other fabric. So I have these strips here, and I want to show you all the layer cakes. Oh my gosh, I had cut a ton of layer cakes last year. Look at all these. And I just can't wait to dig into all that. But I can't be making a ton more little pieces until I start dealing with these that I already have. So I'm going to start with the smallest. I'm going to put them together. I'm going to make them bigger. Oh, and look what I found. Because I thought I want something to sew them to, some kind of a base. So everything doesn't just get kind of wonky everywhere. I think this is an old curtain. I have no idea where it came from. It just happened to be in the pile. So I think someone must have given it to me. But you can see it's hemmed, and either I or somebody else has already cut off the top. So I'm going to cut some strips out of this. And then that's where I'll sew these two. And then once I kind of get a feel for how it's all going, I'll start putting more things together. But in the meantime, oh my goodness, this is going to be something else. After sewing all these little strips onto my base fabric, I have a about 10.5-inch strip. But when I started going through all my pieces, everything here is 10-inch. This must be from when I was cutting my my layer cakes. So what I'm doing is cutting these to about 10-ish, and I'll trim this one off, and then I'll trim both sides. And you can see here my green strip, just like that. I trimmed it, and I trimmed it down to, it was just shy of 2.5 because one of my pieces that I put in there wasn't quite 2.5 inches. And then when I had that ready, look at that, isn't that wonderful? I took a couple of other strips that I had, and in some different colors, and put that here on each side, and then I find a strip on the top and the bottom. Sizes don't matter. You just keep adding until it's the size that you want. So this one I'm going to go ahead and trim back. This one right now measures 10 inches by 7.5. What are the chances? Because I've been making 10 by 7. So this is perfect. And then once you get the binding on, it does add a little more bulk to it. I got to press that better. But look at this. Now, you will notice there are some wonky pieces. Some of them went this way and that, but I just made sure I stayed straight with one edge, and then I'd go back and I trim the other one after, like this. See, I sewed along this edge. I made sure everything lined up, and then this is where I'll be trimming. And that's it for this. How simple is that? Okay, here's number 1. Now, let's see what we can do for the next one. I do want to show you how I'm trimming this, just in case you're a little unsure. So like I said, I have one edge here that's pretty much straight, and I'm going to take this corner and line it up with each end. And you can see there's a few pieces sticking out, and I'm just going to trim that little bit off. And then I'm going to flip it around the other way and see how wide I can get, because I want it to be as wide as possible. Now 2.5 is not going to happen, but I can get just shy of 2.5. Let's see, right there and right there. So here's 2.5, and I'm just underneath it. So that should work out well. But here's one thing that can happen is when you are, let's do it here. I think you can see it better here. When you pull this piece across, see how this can dip a little bit? And that's just because of the way I sewed it. Uneven seams, going too fast, all those kinds of things. So what you want to do is line this up on your grid so that you don't cut the middle and have an hourglass for your strip. Okay, so if I go here, yeah, so see that's going to be 2 3/8. Right about there. Ooh, if I go to 2.5, what do I do? Let's see. If I cut this at 2.5, okay, I just lose the tiniest bit there, and that'll be taken up in a seam, so that's not going to be a problem. Okay, so now I will take a couple pieces here, and let's see what I have. Ooh, a bright red would be kind of fun, and maybe something like this. And where is some other, I have a, I don't know if I want to do the same thing or not. All right, well, I'm going to find a piece here, and I know there's plenty. I just have to find that particular pile, and then I'll be back and show you how these look, and I'll have the next one. Now, here is the absolute simplest way to make a mug rug. And what you do is you start with a piece of batting. You can even use flannel, heavy flannel, something like that, heavy cotton, whatever works for you. And you're going to put one strip down, and then you'll grab a second strip. You want to line them up. And we're going to sew it from side to side like this, and again and again. And this is what you get, this piece right here. And you can see I sewed right to the end here. And now all I have to do is trim it. And I want to keep everything to 10 by 7.5. That seems to be working for me. Okay, yeah, I've got my 10. And now the one thing I do want to look at, let's see, I have 8. So I'm going to cut this at the 8 inches. But then I'm going to cut the 1/2 inch off the other side. That way it'll even up. I don't want this side to be too skinny. You know what I mean? If it's too thin, it's going to look a little bit awkward. And I want to line this up. So that's on the 1/2. Okay. And, oh, look at that. Perfect. Okay, so we have this. This is 8. I'm going to take it to 7.5 right here. And there we are. So by doing it this way, it's kind of a quilt as you go. So this is all quilted. The good thing is you're not going to have to worry about any problems when you do the quilting from the top. So once I did this, I put my piece together with a sweet, adorable background, and I sew. So I left a good 4 inches here. I come around all the way, and anywhere from 1/4 to 3/8 of an inch, just make sure you trim those corners off. And when that's done, you turn it inside out, and you do your really narrow trim, or your narrow stitching around the edges. Then what I did is, as I went around, I went through the center of each block. Now, I did it in white. I would have done it in green ordinarily, but I wanted to do it in white so you could see where the quilting is. So there's quilting here, here. Each strip has a run of quilting, and you can sort of see it on the back, I think. There we go. There's a couple places where you can see it in there. And this is easy. It's perfect. And it makes an adorable little mug rug. And I like the idea of folding this up and then taking, whether it's a piece of ribbon or a piece of fabric, and, you know, tying a cute little bow and making this a gift for somebody, you know, with a cup of tea. Put it in a teacup with some tea bags or hot cocoa. Oh my goodness, yes, hot cocoa. All right, well, whatever you choose to do, this is super simple. And I think you can whip one of these out in maybe 30 minutes. That's about what it took me. It probably took a little longer than that, but I had to do some measurements along the way. And if you just pre-cut your batting and cut it a little oversized, that way you'll have some trimming space, because I did start to, run a little short here and there if I didn't line everything up perfectly. But these are wonderful. Oh my gosh, now you have some of the easiest mug rugs to make for the holidays. And I just want to show you real quick how I'm going to quilt this. What I do is I'm sewing around the edge first, part way. And then when I get to the center of one of the strips, I'm going to turn and sew this way. So you can see where I already quilted this right there. And so I'm going to now do the next strip. And as I come to the edge, I come to about 1/8 of an inch. That way I know I'm catching the seam allowance on the inside. And now I'm going to sew down to the next one. And that looks like about the middle. And I don't worry about measuring too much on this. I pretty much wing it, and it works out. It doesn't have to be exact. All right, we'll come in here again, come up close, and we're going to come all the way down to the center here. Now, this one is kind of optional. I may not quilt this actually because it came out narrower, because the piece on the other end was a wide strip. And when I trimmed my block, let me just get this here, I'm going to fall off the edge. I trimmed my block. This is the side that I trimmed. Now, this is where it's open. So I sewed it on the inside and turned it right side out. And I pressed these so they'll lay nice and flat. And when I sew this, I want to make sure they're lined up nice and even on the edge here so that I don't miss the bottom edge as I'm sewing. And if you need to, if it looks like this is rolling that way too far, just use your fingernail and kind of rake it back a little. Okay, we get in the corner. Now I'm going to do a complete round of the same thing, because when I went this way and this way, this area didn't get done. And I want to make sure the entire edge is sewn. That way it's going to lay flat. And when you wash it, it won't roll. And I'll come down here because, again, you can see this is sewn, but this isn't. And this, if it gets used and washed, this can kind of not pull apart, but roll a bit. Even though this is quilted inside here on that seam, I just don't want to take the chance. So I'm sewing right over the line that I already sewed. And all I need to do is come straight down here, because all this is sewn. And trim it. And it's finished. Look at that. How simple is that? Oh my goodness. So there's no binding. And the quilting, you do half of it, quilt as you go when you're putting it together. Then you come back and put the last couple rows in. And that's just to hold the backing in place. But now I do want to show you how we're going to quilt the other one too. I did spray baste everything together here. That way it's going to hold and I don't have to worry about it shifting. Make sure your backing is facing down, just like on the other one when you're sewing it. You do want to make sure that you get it going in the right direction. Okay, so I'm going to do about a 1/4 inch quilting line on each side, and I'll do one down the middle and then one on this side. I think is what I'm going to do. Let me just back up a little bit. Now, when I'm deciding where to quilt, a big part of the decision is making sure that the seams are reinforced and that there's not going to be anything pulling apart. Yeah, I've not had that happen before, but I do worry about it. Okay, we want to hit right down the middle here. And we'll do the same here. Right there. I'm just going to sew down this one. I'm going to come to the center here. And sew across. And we'll do that again. And we come up to the middle. And I'm going to sew around about 1/8 of an inch here. And that'll kind of be the basting on the edges so everything stays still while I'm putting the binding. All right, there we are. So what I'm going to do now is just trim this to my size that I need, and we're going to bind it. This is going so quick, and don't you just love this? I love these little pieces with the stripes in there. Ah, looks beautiful. It's time to add the binding on, and I kind of center my binding end in the middle here, and then I'm going to come all the way down here to sew because I want to leave this open so I can turn my binding to do the bias seam. Now, fortunately, because of the size that these mug rugs are, all I need is one width of fabric, around 40 to 42 inches. And this is how much I've had left. It's, what is that, about 5 inches. So one width of fabric will be more than enough. But what I want to do now, there we go, is attach my binding to a quilt. And I have my walking foot on. Now, you see my binding is just the littlest bit off so I can see where the end of the quilt is. And I'm going to sew to within 1/4 of an inch of there. And 1/4 of an inch is about that far. All right, now when I get here, I can do one of two things. I can either stop and, lock in my stitches, or you can turn it out and just sew off the edge there. But you want to sew off to the corner because that way, when you go to flip your fabric, it's all set to go. So you see how I did that? Right there. It might be easier to see on the back. See how we sewed out to that corner there. Come over and then out. Now I'm going to hold these edges together and I'm going to flip this up. And you see how that little corner seam sort of holds all that in there. And now I'm going to bring this down, and I want to bring it nice and straight. And I want just the littlest bit above the seam line. That gives me plenty of room for my fold. And so now we're going to hold that there, and I'll line this up. And now all I'm going to do is sew down this edge. And as we get close to the corner, I'm going to fold my edge here, my 2 pieces, and make sure they're lined up with the edge of the quilt, and I can see that corner. I'm going to stop about 1/4 of an inch out, turn, and go to the corner. The turning part is optional. It's just an easy way to clip your thread, because I found when I was stopping, and let's see, this would be a good place. If I was stopping right here and then I cut my threads, I'm going to have those loose threads kind of hanging out on the edge of the binding there, and it might be coming through on the front. This way, when I cut my threads off the seam allowance, then I don't have that problem. And that's the biggest reason why I started doing that. Okay, now we're going to do the same thing here. And we want to bring that down, but it can be just the littlest bit beyond. I don't leave it too far, but again, that just makes the turn nice and smooth. All right, get those threads out of the way. And I do put a little tension on this in that as I'm sewing, I'm going to hold this taut and then hold it down against the quilt sandwich, just so this doesn't get floppy. If you've ever had seam bind, or what is this? Yeah, quilt binding, not seam binding, quilt binding, end up too loose and it kind of ruffles because you have more than you need. That's because you allowed too much of the binding to go through as opposed to holding it nice and tight. Now we're not pulling it, we're just holding it nice and snug. Got the 1/4 inch pivot, and we're off. All right, so we're going to bring this straight up and then bring it straight down. And you want to make sure that these edges here line up. We've got our corner in place. Make sure I've got that over. Yes. Okay, grab my thread. Remember, if you have trouble with your thread bunching up, knotting up at the beginning of a seam, just hold it with your finger. And that'll keep it in place so it's not loose enough to get knotted up underneath. That's a real time saver. Okay, and again, I'm going to hold this a little bit tight. I'm not stretching, I'm not pulling, I'm just holding it nice and taut. All right, we're on our last corner. Going to bring it down. And I'm just going to sew down 1 inch or so. Right here. So I have this in place, and I have this in place. Now what I'm going to do is line this piece up right there with the edge underneath. So you see that? I'm going to put that right here. And I'm going to put this one here, and now all I have to do is cut this. But be careful. You only cut the top one and not the bottom one. We have our pieces overlapping. We're going to open them out and lay them on top of each other. All right, you see that? Open them and together. Don't get them twisted because that gets really messy. And so I'm going to line my corners up here and here. And when you have these short ends, these short, like the mug rugs, small quilts, it can be a little tricky to get your binding done because there's not a lot of room to work with. So what we're going to do is pin both ends, and you can see I cut that crooked in the center, but the outer edges are what I'm going for here. All right, now, this can be a bit cumbersome to work with, so what I do is I take my quilt, I hold it up this way, I put one of my little clamps on it, and now it's going to be easy for me to sew this because, see, I don't have this. If I didn't have that, see how hard this is to pull? But by putting a clamp in here, oh my goodness, it's a lifesaver. I used to use a pin until Phyllis gave me these beautiful little clamps. Oh my goodness. All right, now, notice that it's heavy, and it's very light, but it's heavy enough that it's pulling itself off my table. Okay, so see that? It's crooked. What I'm going to do is move those pins out and get this up straight right here where I need it to be. Okay, so let's put that pin back in because it is easier if you have a couple pins in there. I'm going to make sure everything's flat, nothing's folded underneath, and I'm going to start right there on the corner. And once I get just a couple stitches down, I'm going to make sure this is all nice and flat. I know right where I'm going, right here to this corner. Do you see that? right here. And if I put my finger underneath, you can kind of see where the edge of that other block is right there. All right, and now, if you've been watching my shorts lately, you may have seen a recent video where I wanted to make the point that when you do this sewing, don't clip this off until you test and make sure this is straight. Because if you twisted this, this is going to be like this, and you're going to have to tear it apart. And you watch that short video, and it's a pain in the neck because you have to add an extra piece in because you cut this off. Now, if you did make a mistake, all you have to do is rip out the seam and turn it around the correct way. So that's a very important tip that I want you to go away with. All right, I am going to finger press my seam this way towards me because that's the way I'm sewing. I'm going to go back to my 1/4 inch seam allowance. Okay, and we're going to line everything up and I'm going to sew all the way down here to the other. Okay, so now we're going to turn this around, and I just sort of drag my fingernail on this side and this side, and it helps to straighten that out so it doesn't curl when I go to do my my binding. So what I'm going to do is turn this over, and I'm going to do a decorative stitch. I do the buttonhole stitch. So let me get set up for that, and I'll be right back. I will be sewing from the top, but I just want to show you how to fold these corners as we're sewing because we want to get the miter in on both sides. I'm going to start here. And I'm going to start right in that corner. So I want to make sure that this fabric, this binding, is covering up the stitching there. Okay, so I'm going to start right here. And again, I'm going to hold my thread aside so that it doesn't get caught. And we'll start right here. And I find a good way to keep myself straight when I'm doing the binding is to line up my presser foot along this edge. And if you feel your through the, what do I want to say, through the quilt sandwich, you can feel the fold of the back of the binding so that you know you're catching it. When you get within a couple inches, I'd recommend you stop until you get used to doing this. But I find it's nice to have a little extra folding room in order to get all this to work. So the first thing I do is I bring the binding all the way up, and you see how it folds over right here. Now, we are going to fold this back over this way. But you see how a lot of times, whoops, I've got some loose thread in there. Looks like it's raveling. Oh, there we go. Let's do it again. Okay, so we come up this way, and I fold that down, and it doesn't always line up right here in the corner. Now, we got real lucky here because it did. But if you have problems, the easiest way to get your fold right where you want it is to take your pin and hold it against the binding in the side, so you're actually almost tucking it down along the side of the quilt sandwich. And then you bring this forward like that, and you get a really nice miter right there. See how nice and straight that is? And you just want to line it up in the corner and then get it pinned in place. And it'll hold it in place. There we go, okay. I turn, but I'm not going to sew anything until I get this corner pinned, because it just makes it easier to have everything lined up when I get to that point. Like I said, being a small piece, we don't have a lot of flexible room to work in. So we can get this taken care of on our on our way before we get there, it's going to make it easier. Okay, now the other thing about the fold is you notice that the fold of the miter here, the fold is facing this way, so this is open. We want it to be on the opposite, on the other side, because I'm trying to get the light in there. There we go. Okay, there's the fold right there. And we want the fold to come in the opposite direction on the back side. So we are going to tuck it this way. So we're going to pull our binding all the way up, tuck it in there, and then when you pull it down, if you have any trouble getting it where you want it to go, just take your pin in the corner here and pull it over. There we go, like that. So we're going to put this one in here and that one in there. And now you have a beautiful miter. Let's get that pinned in. So you can see the fold is here, and on this side the fold is there. That way they'll meet up in the corner. So we want to make sure this is all in place, and I'll sew to that pin and pull it out, and then we're off. When you get close like this to the pin, I do slow down because I want to make sure that I don't hit that pin. I'm going to pull it out and just gently turn. And with my needle down, I'm going to get the rest here ready to go. I'll come down about halfway. And you see how easily that just folded up in on itself, and then all I have to do, make sure we get into that light there, is just kind of tuck your pin right in here to pull it over and get it right where you want it so that you have a nice corner there. All right, so we're all pinned and ready to go. All right, your needle's down, turn your corner, and pull your pin out. Now the last thing I do is I'm going to sew, because I've already done this corner here, I'm going to sew down about 1 inch with a straight stitch, and I want that stitching to go right on top of the stitching of my the buttonhole stitch to attach the binding together. Just like that. And that sort of locks all the sewing in. There shouldn't be any loose threads, no raveling. And we have a wonderful looking back. Everything's nice and attached. And look at that. It looks fabulous. So now I'm just going to give it a good press and we're finished. Isn't that beautiful? I saved this till the end because if I had started looking through this at the beginning, I would never have gotten the video finished. And I just needed to share. You know, this crazy business with us living outside our house, we should be moving back within a month. We have people working there. So I went over and we have a big room where all our stuff is stored, and I found my Christmas fabrics from last year. So exciting. And of course, what's fun is to go through and see what's in here. So I found some projects I started on, you know, little cozies and things. Check out this. Oh my goodness. I'd forgotten about these. I was doing just some fun ornaments and cutting them out. And this is a piece of linen that ravels really fun, and I thought that was cool. Remember, I did this 2 years ago, the pieces, and making them into trees. But here's what I'm excited about. I also did a video on all the ways to cut your fat quarters or your yardage in order to get layer cakes and strips and charm squares. I have all this stuff ready and pre-cut to go. So yes, I'll be using some of this on today's video. But then look what else I found, because you know I'm working on that row by row. I promise I am. It is taking some time. But look at all this that I think I was going to maybe make some cozies with them. But no, I am going to make some Christmas trees for the row by row quilt. Look at these are all ready to go. Oh my goodness, this is always fun to find. And then of course all the extra fabric from everything down in here. And here's the Slice Twice quilt that I made last Christmas. And here's the log cabin that I made last Christmas. And here is the courthouse step log cabin with the charm square. This is made, actually it's made with layer cakes. It's wonderful. And I think this is my favorite. And this goes back 2 Christmases ago. And I'm trying to find where I can open it. But it's all these beautiful flying geese. Oh my goodness. So, yes. My goal will be to get these quilted. It won't happen before this Christmas, but maybe by next Christmas this will be finished. So I have a plan that I hope you're excited about today. And I know you've already seen it, but I haven't even made it yet. And I'm really excited about it. So thanks for stopping to take a peek with me. I love sharing this and getting excited about quilting just by looking at other quilts, that I've made. And such fun. Okay, here we go. I'm off and ready. And you know what? This gave me a good idea for the row by row. So we cut our Christmas trees out, right? Or we do our sewing to put strips together, and look at how the strips match or meet up along the way. They're not all the same color. Love it. And so what we do then is we put a piece of batting on there and we quilt it, and then we cut this out and just raw edge applique it. Now, if you're going to make a quilt, you're going to probably want to make it more like a rag quilt. But we can do this. I don't know exactly how. Maybe we'll do a wall hanging with Christmas trees. I just don't know. But I'm glad I've got the time to figure it out. But I'm probably going to be moving in a few weeks, maybe a month. Oh my goodness. Then I have a wedding in New Orleans in November. I hope I have time to quilt. But in the meantime, have a wonderful, wonderful rest of your summer. We've got a couple weeks to go. And then after that, you know what happens. We get super busy. Check it out. We have 4 beautiful mug rugs, and they're in similar fabrics, so they could actually be a set. They can be individual gifts. You can make them bigger into placemats. You can make them smaller into coasters or pot holders, or do the big ones with the Insulbright that I like to use and make a hot pad. There's so much you can do with this, but they're easy, they're quick, and they use scraps. That means you don't have to buy fabric. That's the best part. So I hope you enjoyed this and are ready to get started on some easy gifts for the holidays. And you're not going to have to buy any fabric. Use what you have and make some beautiful little mug rugs. Oh, yes, they'll be a hit. Thanks so much for watching. It's always such a pleasure to have you here with me today. Have a fantastic rest of your week.